know what her husband was up to every day. This woman installed over a dozen cameras in their home. She also placed a tracking device in her husband's car. This way, even when she wasn't with him, she could monitor his every move at any time. Every night before bed, Annie had to have the surveillance feed playing by her bedside to fall asleep peacefully. One evening, Annie called her husband to check in on him, but she instinctively asked what had happened to his hand. At first, Jack didn't notice anything unusual and told her a cat had scratched him. Not to worry, but the next second, it dawned on him, and he immediately questioned how his wife knew his hand was injured. Hearing this, Annie panicked instantly. She lied, saying she hadn't known his hand was hurt. She just suddenly couldn't hear him and thought his hand might be covering the microphone. Then she quickly made an excuse and hung up in a rush. Though somewhat puzzled, the good-natured Jack didn't dwell on it. Annie, however, was left anxious, fearing she'd almost been exposed. Then one day, Jack was on a business trip and had been driving for over 10 hours. But the moment he pulled into a rest stop, his wife called right on time. For safety reasons, she insisted on booking him a hotel to rest before continuing. But she hadn't even asked where he was before making the reservation. This couldn't help but make Jack suspicious. He recalled the day before, he'd kindly given a female colleague a ride to the airport, and not long after dropping her off, his wife had called, her tone full of accusation. Knowing his wife as he did, he began to sense what might be going on. The next day, he took the car to a repair shop. Under the guise of getting it checked, he asked the mechanic to look for any tracking device. Sure enough, the mechanic found one. The more Jack thought about it, the angrier he grew. But not wanting to disrupt their daughter's exam preparations, he suppressed his anger and didn't confront Annie. A few days later, the flight attendant from upstairs suddenly came knocking. She explained that her place was being renovated, and, since their layouts were identical, she wanted to check where their water heater was installed. But the whole scene made Annie uneasy. She immediately grabbed her phone, ready to question Jack. Just as she was about to dial, she saw on the surveillance feed that Jack and the flight attendant kept their distance. He never even entered the bathroom, just pointed out the installation spot from outside. Seeing this, Annie finally let her guard down. That evening, the family of three was video chatting when a doorbell suddenly rang on Jack's end. The video feed instantly went black. Annie kept shouting her husband's name, but her daughter, annoyed by the noise, hung up the call. So Annie hurried back to her room, closed the door, and secretly opened the surveillance feed on her computer only to find most of the camera views blocked, except for a small section of the kitchen. Annie's paranoia instantly flared up. She immediately tried to video call Jack, but the moment he answered, it switched to an audio call. Annie told her husband to go to the kitchen and send a photo of the gas meter reading, but she didn't notice their daughter eavesdropping outside the door. Jack soon sent the photo. Annie zoomed in on the numbers on the gas meter and saw they hadn't increased. In fact, they'd decreased significantly. She accused him, saying this couldn't possibly be their gas meter. Just then, her husband answered the video call. Annie was stunned. Her husband was with friends. Seeing Annie's expression soften slightly, Jack angrily slammed the fridge door shut. The noise startled the cat that had been blocking the camera. Seeing the surveillance feed, Annie realized she'd misunderstood him. Flustered, she explained she must have misremembered the gas meter numbers. Right then, their daughter burst in and discovered her mother was remotely monitoring her father. She demanded to know why her mother would do such a thing, but Annie claimed it was just to keep an eye on their cats. She was afraid their father wouldn't take good care of them. As their daughter turned to leave, Annie grabbed her arm, urging her not to tell her father, to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. But not long after, all the home surveillance cameras suddenly disconnected from the network. Annie immediately started checking her husband's whereabouts. Seeing it was Annie calling, Jack panicked, because at that very moment, a beautiful woman was lying in his bedroom.